Hi, gang. All right, let's take a moment to talk a little bit about the warm up for the Inspired Sale class. Now, I know you went through Marianne's video going through sort of the technical stuff. I want to dive a little deeper and at the same time pull back. So let's think about the warm up for just a second. The warm up is literally the first thing that you do when you get to the house, right? So you've done your setup call, and now if you can picture a little van driving to the house, and now you're at the house, and you walk up to the door and do all the things. Okay, but what do you do maybe even before you walk up to the door? What do you do to get ready, right? So just for a moment, I want us to think about your arrival. What does that look like? So when do you arrive? If you have a 2 o'clock appointment, what is the right time to ring the doorbell? Well, 2:02 is late. Matter of fact, even 2 o'clock might be late. Now, 1:45 is really, I would venture to say, is too early. 15 minutes or even 10 minutes early is too early. The sweet spot is somewhere around 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes earlier than when the appointment time is. If you're too early, for a lot of people, they're not ready for you. I mean, I know that sounds crazy to think somebody's got to get ready for me to show up and do a proposal, but for a lot of people, it's true. I mean, look, if you came to my house, I've got Zoom calls, I'm busy all day, I've got meetings. So if I've got you for a 2 o'clock appointment, chances are, if you ring the doorbell at 1:45, I might still be in the middle of a meeting and I'm not ready to get off that meeting yet. So I would suggest that you're maybe 3 or 4 minutes before your scheduled time. Um, I'm also going to go so far as to say if you're 2:01 or 2:02, you're late. For some of you, maybe that 1 or 2 minutes doesn't make a big difference. Maybe for a lot of your customers, it doesn't matter, but you will run into that customer where being 1 or 2 minutes late is going to be a big deal. And so, this is a game where we win by millimeters. We win by literally less than an inch. And making sure that you are on time when you ring that doorbell makes a big difference for a lot of people. All right, so where are you going to position the van? Some people will say just put it in the driveway. I say absolutely not. If there's something, you never know what's going to set people off, right? You might park in the driveway and be blocking somebody that's trying to get out of the garage. You might park in the driveway and then there's an oil spot on the driveway that was not yours, but now the customer is upset because there's an oil spot on the driveway. Now, I realize that different people are in different territories and there's differences. If you're out in a big rural area and it's a half a mile from the street to the house, okay, then you're probably pulling into the driveway. I get it. But for a typical subdivision, more than likely you're going to park on the street in front of the front door so that when the customer opens the door, what do they see? They see the mobile showroom sitting there. That is a huge differentiator. So if you haven't secret shopped some of your competitors yet, do it. See who else shows up at the house and see what they're driving. A lot of your competitors are driving their own vehicles. So that means they're showing up in some Toyota Corolla. Maybe they're in a Prius. Who knows what they're driving, right? But it's not a branded, it's not a wrapped mobile showroom. And while you might get tired of the rattling of the cage in the van, for your customers to look out and see that van, it actually makes a big difference. How are you going to prepare for the appointment? Obviously, you've had a chance to take a look at the stuff that's in Salesforce. You've had a chance to do your setup call, but what other intelligence can you pull? I mean, look around the neighborhood. What type of neighborhood is it? Does it look like there's a lot of kids in this neighborhood? Does it look like this is a retirement community? What exactly, what can you see? What can you gather? What can you absorb? Even as you're walking up to the house, is there a tricycle sitting in the yard? People, my gosh, people put so much of their personal information up just on the back of their cards. What are their little stick figures telling you? The little stick figure decals that are on the back of the rear glass of the car. What is that telling you? If there's a ring around the license plate, what does that license plate holder tell you? Are they a Pittsburgh Steelers fan? I mean, there's so much information that you can pick up if you're just observant to your surroundings. So we've talked about when do you want to arrive? And I'm going to suggest 3 or 4 minutes before the appointment time. Where do you want to park? How do you want to be dressed? So, do you want to be the guy that shows up in ratty blue jeans? Maybe that's comfortable for you. You know what would be really comfortable is showing up in gym shorts, but that's not a professional appointment. So, think about how you want to be dressed. How do you want to greet the customer? And you really ought to put booties on your feet. Now, I know that there's some people that argue, well, I just take my shoes off at the door and then I don't bother with booties. That's fine. And that's going to be fine until you walk into a house that has, well, how do I put this nicely? You walk through wet spots on the carpet thanks to the dog or cat. And then you're going to wish that you had put booties on instead of just walking around in barefoot or in your sock feet. So I'm going to encourage you to use booties. There are some customers that have bought simply because somebody put booties on and respected their house. All right, now let's think about the warm up. So what is the number one purpose of the warm up? What is the main thing that we are trying to do in the warm up? It's really very simple. The main primary purpose of the warm-up is to simply build rapport with the customer. That's it. Now, there's other tactics that we're going to talk about, and there's other tactics that I know you've learned about, like asking transition questions in order to get an objection, bringing down the shield of ice. I get it. It's all accurate, and I'm 100% on board with all of it. But let's not forget the number one purpose of that warm-up. It is to connect with the customer, right? So what are some ways that you can connect with the customer? How can you melt that shield of ice? How can you build that rapport? If this little acronym helps you, forms, great, use it. If not, then don't. It's fine. Learn about their family and friends. Ask them. Ask them about their occupation. Where do you work? What do you do? Ask them about their recreation, their hobbies. Where do they spend their time, right? So when they're not at work, where do they love to spend their time? What do they spend their money on, right? What are their motivations? So is this a person that spends their money on vacations? Is it and experiences? I went backpacking across Spain last year, or is this a person who values material things more? And so you look around the house and you see, it's really well decorated, and there's some what appears to be fairly expensive, knickknacks around the house. What is it exactly that they spend their money on, right? Now, you're not going to get a look at their checkbook to see or their bank statement to see, but just be observant, and through conversation, what is it that motivates them to spend money? Now, when it comes to sports, sports is a little tricky, because if you get into a conversation with the customer about sports and you're going back and forth about the Kansas City Chiefs, you're going back and forth about, the Dallas Cowboys and who the quarterback is. Okay, you might have a wonderful time to chat with the customer, but the warm-up is not about chit chat. It's about getting information about the customer. I'll say that again. The warm-up is not just about chit chat. It is about getting information about the customer. So if you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, you might have a great opportunity to chat with them, but you haven't learned anything about them as a person unless you happen to uncover that they love the Cowboys because, 3 times a year they go see them and it's a big family event and tailgating and all that stuff. Okay, now you get an opportunity to see something about them and not just talking about the sports team. Ideally, at the conclusion of the warm-up, we've had a great warm-up, ideally, I can tell you where that customer spends their time and their money. Or I should say where they want to spend their time and their money. Maybe they work 80 hours a week, but when they finally get a day off, they really love doing whatever that is. So in the warm-up, you have a goal, and your goal in the warm-up, yes, you are trying to build some rapport with the customer, but you are trying to get them to talk about their favorite subject, themselves. You are absolutely trying to get them to talk about themselves so that you can gain information about them. That's going to play in as you go through the rest of this appointment, and you tailor how you present the company story, how you present product to them, how you do your presentation. You're going to be able to tailor it to them as a person because you took information from that warm-up. Now, I'm going to share something. I'm going to share something with you that you might not want to hear. Your customer they don't really care about your story. Let me explain what I mean by that, okay? I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just being straight up with you. You go into a customer's house and you find out they love to go on vacation, and, oh, they had a wonderful vacation to Greece last year, and you interrupt them and say, oh, Greece, that's fantastic. You know what? Me and my friend, we went to Italy and we had a great time. We were going to make it to Greece, but we couldn't quite get there, and blah, 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 blah. And what happens? The customer's eyes glass over, their ears stop up. They don't care. You are there to give them the opportunity to tell their stories. It's really not an opportunity for you to tell yours. I mean, you might sort of give them enough information to sort of keep the conversation going. But this isn't your time to tell your stories. This is the customer's time to tell their story. And for some people that's hard because a lot of people have come from a sales background, and I've heard people say, "Oh, I could talk to a tree stump." But it doesn't really matter. That doesn't really matter, does it? What I'm really interested in is, can you get a tree stump to talk to you? And can you get that tree stump to share information about themselves? And can you listen to that tree stump? I've heard it said many, many times, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should do twice as much listening as you do talking. And in the warm up, maybe even more listening. So the warm up is about the customer, not the floor. All right. So let's break this down. You come into a home, you have a chance to sit down on the couch and talk to the customer. Great. Now we're having a great warm up. Okay. The customer starts talking about the floor because that's what you're there for, right? Oh, I want to take this carpet out. I want to put hardwood in. You're going to have to find a way to sort of divert that conversation back around to something that has to do with them and not the floor. Because right now in the warm up, yes, I want to know about the floor, but I want to know about the floor later. Right now, what I want to know about is the person. So this is about the customer, not the floor. Okay, well, what do you do when you have that customer? You walk in the door and immediately they're like, oh, let's go over here to the bedroom. This is where the floor is that I want to replace. All right, sometimes you're going to have to let them get it out, but you still need to pull back to a warm up and actually have a real warm up with somebody. Now, ideally, you're sitting on a couch or you're sitting at the kitchen table. I love getting to the kitchen table. Why? Because then I can see the refrigerator and everybody's life is completely displayed on the refrigerator. Or there's some bulletin board or somewhere where the kids' pictures are up or the kids' finger paintings or whatever it is. You can see what's going on in this person's life if you make it into the kitchen. If not, okay, the couch will do. If you absolutely have to, then at least do the warm up. If you're standing, even if you're standing in a room, at least get some semblance of a short warm up. I'll share one quick story with you. I went into a customer's home and it was the same thing. They wanted to take me straight to the room where they wanted to replace the carpet. And so I sort of froze in the foyer. And they had this cabinet in the foyer, this glass front cabinet that had all these beer steins from around the world. I mean, I didn't know they were from around the world at the time. There were just all these beer steins there. So I asked the customer as they're walking down the hall, I said, hold on a second. Where are these from all over the place? It looks like you got quite a collection of steins here. And the guy comes back around the corner and says, oh, you like those, do you? I said, yeah, this is kind of cool. Then he explains to me that he was in the military for a lot of years and he collected a stein from everywhere he went. We had a great conversation just standing in the foyer. Ideally, it would have been better if we were sitting on the couch, but you know what? We just had a great warm up. And then once he had explained his story and went through the military and all that stuff, then I could say, oh, so tell me, how long have you been thinking about replacing your floor? And we went right back into the mode that he was going into. Okay, let's take a look at the floor and whatever else. But it gave me the information I needed to be able to then tailor the appointment specifically to him and his wife rather than just doing something generic that anybody could do. You want to connect with people on commonalities or let the customer teach you something. So I had no idea about these beer steins or what they represented. I just sat back and asked questions so that he could teach me. Now, there's other appointments that you walk into where you and the customer connect on things that you have in common. That's great. But even if you have nothing in common, find a way for the customer to teach you something, right? Tell me more. I love this line. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more about these beer steins. Tell me more about your experience overseas. Tell me more about your time in the military. It's such a neat phrase. Tell me more. And it just keeps the customer talking. Beautiful. Remember, this is not just chit chat. Yes, it is chit chat, but it's not only chit chat. This is an opportunity for you to get information that you're going to learn or that you're going to use later in the process. So keep that in mind when you're doing your warm up. And I look forward to working with you in the next module.